Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host Matt Filipovitz. Matt, what's going on?
Bill, with dinner tonight, I decided to watch an episode of Family Feud, and I saw the worst answer I've ever seen in an episode of television.
All right, before you dive in, this is Steve Harvey's Family Feud.
Correct.
Okay.
So the prompt was, we asked 100 people, after you divorce your husband, whose picture are you replacing him in your wallet with? Was the prompt. A lot of good answers from these lovely families. There's one dude on the team that ended up winning the game, and I'm so mad about it. He said the picture would be of all the money this hypothetical woman saved. And I was like actively upset that they won the game after that answer.
Did they get any points for that?
No points for that. No.
Okay.
So I'm actively upset about that, but it's been about 45 minutes since that happened. So I'm cooling down a little bit and I'm ready to talk a little bit of Penn State versus the first Maction matchup of the year.
Before we folks, one thing you might learn is that there's only so much that we could say about Penn State versus Bowling Green. So I'm going to take this a step further. Do you usually watch the Family Feud, or was this a spur of the moment thing?
No, I have an antenna, and I was trying to decide like what I have a Roku as well. Roku, not a sponsor, but they could be. I have an antenna, so I usually just kind of flip it on to see what kind of weird game show is on those channels. Like when I sit down for dinner. And tonight it was Family Feud. So
okay,
yeah. Not my game show of choice though, if I'm being honest.
Really, what is?
I think it's called Pressure Luck with the no whammies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Pressure Luck.
Yeah.
A friend's bachelor party in New Orleans a year or two ago. We just kept the buzzer network on in the background the entire time, and God, I get so much joy out of watching those stupid little, especially the really cheap ones, which are like you win our grand prize, which is $1,000 and like a subscription to TV Guide. But neither here nor there. We're here to talk about football and other stuff. If you want us to keep talking about Family Feud on the podcast, please tweet at us at RLR blog, and we will give a weekly Family Feud update, I suppose.
Sure.
But until we get to that point, we're just going to sit here and talk about Penn State football. Instead, the Nittany Lions, of course, picked up a win over West Virginia last week, moved to 1-0 on the season. New AP poll came out, 8th in the most recent AP poll, due to some a really impressive showing by a couple of SEC teams. Penn State actually fell to 6th in SP Plus, but I believe their rating is pretty similar.
Can I say something at the top here, Bill, about that AP poll?
Yeah, go ahead.
College Poll Tracker lets you take a look at how individual people who vote in the AP poll voted. And there was one gentleman who, I don't remember his name, but he was affiliated with the University of Virginia, is what he covers now. He had Penn State ranked the lowest of anybody in the preseason AP poll. Do you know what he had him ranked, Bill? Do you want to take a guess?
13th.
18th. This person thought Penn State was the number 18 team in the country. Do you know what this gentleman had them ranked as in the latest version?
4th.
8th. A very impressive admittance of being wrong by that gentleman. I'm sorry I don't remember your name, and I'm not going to call out a AP voter on our podcast, but shout out to that guy for righting his wrongs and putting Penn State in the top 10 where they belong, I think.
I'll call Matt Brown out on our podcast. Matt Brown of The Athletic, you son of a gun. No, it was not Matt Brown. Matt, lovely person, good Penn Stater as well. Neither here nor there, but Penn State, of course, is now going to be moving on this week into a game against Bowling Green. The Falcons are an interesting opponent. Picked up a win last week, 41-17 against Fordham. Housed the opening kickoff. Fordham was never close against Fordham. Late TD made it slightly more respectable than it ended up being. They're coming off of a 7-6 campaign, which we mentioned on the last edition of the podcast, included a 38-27 win over Georgia Tech. And
at Georgia Tech on the road.
At Georgia Tech, yeah. And an impressive showing against Minnesota in the Quick Lane Bowl, where they lost 30 30-24 against PJ Flex team. Let me look at just one quick thing. Yeah, scored a touchdown with 2 minutes and 33 seconds left to make it a one-score game. Just weren't able to get the football back. Matt, I assume you're like me. You don't expect this to be a particularly close football game, but I definitely appreciate the fact that they're playing a team that is feisty, is used to going up against P5 competition, has beaten P5 competition, and isn't just going to be a team that loses automatically when they get off the bus, like an FCS team or something like that.
No, I'm not nervous about this game, but like the point spread makes me very uncomfortable. I think it opened at about 30.5. I've heard it's up to about 34.5. I'm not touching it because I think Bowling Green in and of itself, like Scott Loeffler can definitely coach. Connor Bazelak is a decent quarterback, a guy who's been at multiple Power 5 programs. Harold Fannin, I believe is how you say his last name, first team All-MAC as a tight end, led them in receiving week 1 against Fordham. And again, that Fordham game happened on a Thursday night, so they've had 3 extra days to prep for Penn State. And Terrion Stewart, their running back, second team All-MAC last year, 14 carries, 161 yards, 3 scores last week against Fordham as well. Like, there's some decent ball players on the Bowling Green side of that field. And I don't know when we want to talk about this, Bill, so I'll just get it out of the way now. Like, there's a lot of context around this game that makes me, just think it's going to be gross. First of all, the forecast looks disgusting for this upcoming weekend. And second of all, I think I don't do a good enough job remembering that these are college kids. Like, no matter how focused Franklin and that staff has that team, this is a September game on, outside of Saturday, what looks like a pretty nice weekend weather-wise, coming off a dominant performance on the road against a Power 5 opponent with a bye week coming up. The way I liken this to, Bill, is like when you have an exam in college in a hard class and then you have a presentation in your theater class that you don't feel like you have to prep for, and you end up doing worse on that. Like, that's how I am kind of viewing this game right now. I think it's so easy to see a scenario where Penn State just thinks it's a noon kick. We're going to be on a bye week really soon. We get a little bit of time to ourselves after an impressive win. And I'm just worried they're going to come out a little bit sluggish. But again, like, Penn State should take care of business, and this should be a comfortable Saturday for all of us.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The line opened at Penn State by 32. Penn State 32-point favorites has moved up to 34.5-point favorites since the game opened on the opened out in the desert. And I kind of agree. I mean, I think that two really key factors here that make this game interesting. One is the fact that their head coach, Scott Loeffler, is a guy who knows Penn State, who knows the Big Ten, played quarterback at Michigan, was a coach at Michigan for quite some time, has had some high major offensive coordinator gigs before he got hired at Bowling Green in 2019. And then obviously they have like you mentioned, a quarterback in Connor Bazelak, former 4-star, played for Missouri, committed to Missouri out of a high school, went to Indiana. And, I think we mentioned this in the last episode of the pod. He was only there for 1 year in 2022, didn't play in the game between Penn State and Indiana, but it's not like he's going to be walking into Beaver Stadium at noon on Saturday and have no idea what's going to be waiting for him. Rest of the team, obviously, that might be a little bit different, but this is a game where I think Penn State, how do I want to say this? I think that if Penn State is the team, Matt, that we think they can be, what you just mentioned, that inherent concern, that inherent queasiness, that inherent whatever you want to say, that they might just come out and be at a 2 out of 10. They might just be on cruise control. They might whatever. I think for Penn State, if you want to show that you are the team that people think you are capable of being, that you clearly think you are capable of being, that a lot of people who follow Penn State, a lot of people who watched the performance you put up last week against West Virginia think, you need to be able to come out here, and I'm optimistic that they will, need to be able to come out here and basically say, either opening drive or marching the ball right down the field and scoring a touchdown or 3-and-out or getting the ball back. And you just never give Bowling Green an ounce of faith that they have a chance in this game, let alone win this game.
Right. And it's not so much queasiness, Bill. It's just like, again, I feel like Penn State is going to win this game fairly comfortably by multiple scores. But like, again, you think about the Northwestern game last year, quiet game, not a whole lot of excitement in that stadium. Not saying Beaver Stadium won't be buzzing, but what should be a pretty much a layup of a game in a quiet environment with a bye week coming up on the other side of this game and then a UMass game coming up after that. Penn State looked awful in the first half. I was at that game. I remember how terribly out of sync everybody looked. And I'm just monitoring a situation where that's the case again on Saturday against a Bowling Green team that, although like the teams they upset in the P4, P5 realm aren't like of Penn State's caliber, they still have proven that they're unafraid to go into a Power 5 program, Power 4 program, and give them their best punch. So that's just all I'm looking out for. Again, I don't think that they have the horses to compete with Penn State. But again, if this game is 7-3 after the first quarter, I will not be surprised in the least.
And the reason that Bowling Green might have a little bit of optimism about what they're able to do against Penn State is they are able to put up points and move the football a little bit. Obviously, they're not not reinventing the wheel on offensive football or anything like that. But Leffler is an offensive-minded coach, has a veteran quarterback. They have talented players on their offense. 87th nationally in offensive SP plus last week against Fordham, 475 yards of total offense, 170 on through the air, 305 on the ground, 9.2 yards per rush, 41 points scored. Coming into this season, a number of players on their offense were named preseason All-MAC selections by Phil Steele, Harold Fannin, their excellent tight end that you just mentioned, Matt, along with an offensive lineman, Alex Walschlager, our first team players, second team, Connor Bazelak, Nate Pabst, Terry and Stewart, their running back, and then third team, Tunde Fadukasi and offensive lineman. There is talent on that side of the ball for Bowling Green, but that just shouldn't matter. Whether or not it will is a different story, but with this Penn State defense, with the levels that we saw it reach against West Virginia, like, yeah, they're probably going to be able to run the ball a little bit. Bazelak is probably going to make a couple of good decisions, but for the most part, like, this shouldn't be something where Penn State has to worry too terribly much.
No, I think we'll see a lot of backups, and I think we'll see them early in a rotational role. And like, I do think that eventually we're going to see the benches clear by mid fourth quarter, a little like 3 drives later than we're comfortable with. That's all I'm saying. Like, again, I'm not predicting an upset. I'm not predicting anything like that. I'm just saying, like, a lot of external factors that I know can affect people seem to be lining up for this game for Penn State. Again, coming off a huge win, noon kick, warm weather bye week. Like, it's easy to see a scenario where they come out a little slow and it takes them a second to get their feet underneath them. So that's all I'm saying.
So what about this game, whether it's any players on Penn State's defense, anything that Bowling Green does has you interested, has you thinking like this is an opportunity for Penn State to really flex, or this is an area where Penn State's going to have to really lock in going up against Bowling Green's offense?
I mean, the immediate thought goes to the linebackers here and making sure that they're gap disciplined, that they're very sound. Like, you rattled that off, Bill. What was that? Essentially a 2.5 to 1, 2.75 to 1 rushing yards to passing yards ratio they had week 1 against Fordham. I get it's Fordham. It's a much different animal than they could even, like, anybody could even fathom Fordham to Penn State football. Like, I understand that. But linebackers, I mean, you're down maybe Tamir Robinson. I know he wasn't at practice this week. So right there, this feels like a great opportunity for Dakari Nelson to get a couple of reps where he could be valuable. A lot of Tyler Elsdon, a lot of Dom DeLuca. I'm still going back and forth on, like, what do you want to see out of, like, Anthony Specca and Kari Jackson? Like, if Tamir Robinson is out for an extended period of time, you're already down Keon Wiley. Kavion Keys is out of the program. Do you want to, if you want to preserve their red shirt, which I think they do you want to waste a game, quote unquote, waste a game on Bowling Green when perhaps Tamir Robinson is out for an extended period of time and you want to keep those games in your back pocket for as long as you can. So just a couple of things I'm keeping an eye on throughout the course of this game. But again, the defense should take care of business. The front seven should be able to get after the quarterback in passing downs. But I feel confident the defensive tackles are going to be great. It's just the linebackers cleaning up the messes and making sure that they're not getting gashed for like a 67-yard run, which I think is how Delaware got their points in the similar game last year.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking out for, Bowling Green isn't exactly a dynamic passing offense. If you look at their team last year, their top returning receiver, well, obviously Fannin, the tight end who we mentioned, was their top pass catcher overall, but their top returning receiver, Finn Hogan, last year caught 11 balls for 163 yards. He caught one ball for 6 yards last week, and it's Fordham and their top receiver.
That's the most 5'10" dude name I've ever heard of. What's he listed at, Bill? I'm going to guess. He's got to be around there.
Okay.
I'm going to say he's 5'10".
Okay.
He's 6'5"? Oh, my Lord. Yep. I apologize.
I was going to let you do that. But yeah, then their top receiver, Malcolm Johnson Jr., caught 3 balls for 33 yards against Fordham. Previous season, 6 receptions, 89 yards. He's caught 1 touchdown in his career, and that was back in 2021. So not a team that is too terribly much of a threat to move the ball through the air. And if Basilek is going to throw the football, going to be a lot of short passes, going to be a lot of quick completions. For his career, he's never really been a guy who tests defenses down the field. At Missouri, 6.9, 7.3, and 6.8 yards per attempt. At Indiana, 5.4 yards per attempt. Wonder whatever happened to that head coach. And then Bowling Green, 7.1 and 7.6 yards per attempt. 48 touchdowns and 34 turnovers in his career. Didn't throw any turnovers last week. He's a guy who I think Penn State is going to be able to pressure. He's a guy who I think Penn State, he's probably not going to put the ball in too bad a danger until Penn State starts to force him to do that a little bit. But he's a guy that, he's going to be keying in on Fannin as his pass catcher and his running backs. But that running game is what has me really interested. We saw Penn State push around West Virginia's, highly touted offensive line last week, bottle up a really good running game. And in response, they're going to have to go up against a back in Terrion Stewart, who, again, last week, 14 carries, 161 yards, 11.5 yards per attempt, and 3 touchdowns. Basilek ended up scoring a touchdown on the ground. They have another back they like, Jason Patterson, 7 carries, 26 yards last week. And they like to sprinkle in, they did it a little bit last week, a true freshman, or a redshirt freshman, I believe, quarterback named Lucian Anderson, who is from Georgia, scored a touchdown last week. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, and can absolutely fly. So
big dude. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not worried at all about Penn State's secondary. I actually, James Franklin had a comment this week in practice about rotating a cornerback at the depth of the cornerback room. And that, I don't think he's necessarily doing the thing where he's trying to give a hint about what he plans on doing or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those games where, a guy like Elliott Washington, a guy like Zion Tracy, a guy like Audavian Collins gets a little bit more run than we might think, because this game is going to be won in the front seven with the Penn State's defensive line that showed a lot of promise, especially against the run last week. And then a linebacker core that been hit by injuries. Matt, I think you made a really good point when you mentioned getting guys like Kari Jackson, like Dakari Nelson, like Anthony Specca onto the field and getting them some reps. And, they bottle up this running game to the extent that we think they're capable of. I don't see how Bowling Green is able to consistently move the football.
No, and I think that again, that's where it's going to be won. Like the defensive tackles, especially like guys like Alonzo Ford, who I thought played really well in more run than I was expecting last week against West Virginia, have a chance to ascend to that, number 3 guy. I think it's pretty consistently going to be Zane Durant and Devon J. Thomas as the first 2 off the bench, but Hakeem Beamon, Keziah Izzard, and Alonzo Ford are fighting for that next up mentality. Again, all 5 of those guys are going to play a ton, but Alonzo Ford's a guy specifically I'm really excited to watch because he's really proven that he can be a trusted run stuffer in the middle of that defense. And again, anything you can do to make life easier for that linebacking core until you either get a little bit healthier or get more guys up to speed, you have to take advantage of in these early weeks.
You know what else people should take advantage of, Matt?
I have no idea, Bill. What is it?
You're supposed to take your no. Come on, Matt.
Home Field
Come on,
Apparel.
you know what it is.
The
there
promo
you go,
code from
Matt.
Home Field Apparel.
Good job. That's
Gotcha.
right. You should take advantage of the promo code from Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel has been our sponsor since we decided to go podcast only 3 seasons ago now, and they've been nothing but great for us over that time. You know the spiel by this point. If there's anything that you want to add to your closet in the collegiate apparel game, Home Field Apparel has it. And of course, they don't just have stuff from Penn State. If you were a fan of any school, odds are Home Field Apparel is going to have something for you. Give me 1 second because I just had a thought. I wonder if they have anything from Bowling Green, because if they have a Bowling Green collection and you are a Bowling Green fan, guess what? You can also take advantage of the offers the Home Field Apparel has. And yes, Bowling Green does have a collection of some, quite frankly, fantastic looking stuff on Home Field Apparel.
Falcon is such a versatile mascot, dude. It's so good.
It is, and the color scheme gray of the grays and the browns and the oranges is really nice, really sharp stuff from Home Field Apparel for Bowling Green, for Penn State, for any other school you could possibly think of. Anything that you would want to add to your collection, t-shirts, hoodies, joggers, you name it, Home Field Apparel is going to have it. I have tons of stuff from Home Field Apparel. Matt has tons of stuff from Home Field Apparel. There's a chance that you have tons of stuff from Home Field Apparel, but if you don't have anything from Home Field Apparel, we would like to advise you to use the promo code RLR24 to get 15% off of your first order. Once again, promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. Thank you again to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this edition of the pod. Thank you to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring every edition of the pod. Now let's get back to talking about Penn State's upcoming game against Bowling Green. And Matt, the thing that is far, far, far more interesting to me than Penn State's defense going up against Bowling Green's offense is Penn State's offense going up against Bowling Green's defense. Yep. Bowling Green coming into this game, 92nd in defensive SP plus. Last week allowed 401 yards to Fordham, 219 through the air, 182 on the ground, 9.5 yards per pass attempt for Fordham last week, which is something we should almost certainly dog ear. You know my thoughts on this game. I will go on that spiel again here in a second. But what are your general thoughts on Penn State's offense going into a game against a defense that they should be able to have plenty of success moving the ball against?
Yeah, I think that how they handle their offense is going to be relatively forecast dependent. I mean, looking at what I have right now, it looks like most of the rain is going to be out of there by the time kickoff comes around. Again, that is simply from the weather app on my iPhone. I'm sure your local meteorologist can advise you better than I could. But I think Penn State is going to try to move the football efficiently. The big narrative for a lot of national folks coming out of week 1 is Andy Kotelnicki has schemed the Penn State offense back into relevancy, which is so impressive right off the bat. Now you have to build upon that. And how many times have we seen Penn State not struggle against lower level competition, but their inability to do what they want to do on offense end up leaving a little bit of breadcrumbs to problems that would emerge later. Delaware 2021, not good running the football. Let's think back to UMass and Delaware last year. They couldn't really throw the football and there were still no explosive plays. I'm sure there's an example in 2022 that's escaping me right now. But what I want to see here, Bill, is the offense to be efficient, Aller to look like he is on the path to a first-round selection. Bill, I saw a CBS Sports mock draft today. It has Drew Aller going number 14 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which interesting that's the narrative. Renegade. After 1 week. I'm just saying, I don't know if that's the case. It's interesting that is where we're at 1 game into this college football season. So I want to see Aller hit a couple different receivers. I want to see Cam Wallace hit a big hole if that opens up for him as RB3. Katron Allen, I don't really need to see him that much this week if he's still a little bit dinged up. Again, he didn't have the best game running the football last week, but he caught a touchdown, which is always great to see. So be explosive, get more guys involved, keep Aller upright, and keep putting more sicko stuff on tape for opposing defensive coordinators. If you haven't seen it, Dan Casey, who runs a great play-a-day newsletter, really gave Andy Kittlenicki his flowers today on Twitter with a good thread explaining how he kind of schemed a lot of Penn State's touchdowns last week. I highly recommend you go check that out. We retweeted it over on Twitter at RLR blog. But yeah, Bill, like, just show me that the offense is continuing to build, so that way when the bigger games come, I feel confident they can go out there and do whatever they want.
My thing with trying to keep the game a little more cagey is that they play in the Big Ten and they play football games in November, and you might need to be able to throw the ball in potentially inclement conditions. So like,
Yep,
I
that's
still
true.
want them to do that as much as possible. Like, my thing with this game is that if Penn State can't choose their own adventure, choose to win this game however they want to win it, if they want to win this game by having Drew Aller throw the ball 50 times and you only hand it to Katron Allen and Nick Singleton when it's a 3rd and 1 and you just want to work in short yardage stuff, they can win the football game like that. They can probably win the football game pretty convincingly like that. If they decide they want to win this game by running the ball 60 times and having Drew throw the ball 20 times, they can win the football game like that. My thing is that the way that they choose to win this football game is probably going to be pretty instructive for where they think the strengths and the weaknesses and what is important for how their team needs to operate going forward. I look at that Delaware game where they ran the ball 60 times for 315 yards and 6 touchdowns. Drew Aller's line on the day, 22 for 26, 204 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions, 7.8 yards per attempt. Drew throwing the ball accurately for not a ton of yards per attempt and not a ton of yards period was like instructive, because that's just what he essentially did all season. And
Yep.
the longest play in the passing game in that game against Delaware was a catch by Dante Cephas for 26 yards. Okay, that sucks. They need to be able to do better than that.
Yep.
Dante Cephas had a catch of 26 yards. Trey Wallace had a catch for 15 yards. Keandre Lambert-Smith had a catch for 19 yards. Those were their longs among their wide receiver room on the day. And as it turns out, as the season went along, Drew throwing for 7.5, under 8 yards per attempt, completing a good number of his passes, not doing a ton with that, and the receivers not making big plays in the passing game. That was just a problem all year.
Yeah.
You go to the UMass game that they played a little bit later in the season. Drew, 16 for 23, 162 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns. Again, it's the exact same game. Yeah, he's finding the end zone. He's not doing too terribly much in the passing game. Meanwhile, the running game, Nick Singleton, 17 for 79, 5.3 yards per attempt. Katron Allen, 9 for 68, 7.6 yards per attempt. In the passing game, their long for receptions was Theo Johnson had one for 30 yards. Trey Wallace had one for 21 yards. Keandre Lambert-Smith had one for 9 yards. Harrison Wallace and Keandre Lambert-Smith were the only wide receivers to catch balls in that football game. Again, they could have beaten UMass however they felt like it. They could have beaten UMass in any way they wanted, and the way that they wanted was, we're not going to throw the football all that much. We're not going to run the risk of putting the ball in jeopardy through the air all that much. And like, that stuff is instructive, and that stuff gives you a hint into what they think about their football team.
Yeah.
I say all that to say this, Matt. I want them. Last season, Drew has his coming out party against West Virginia. The next game was that Delaware game, and then a stinker against Illinois, a game against Iowa where he just basically checked it down over and over and over again, to his credit, because that won them the game convincingly. A not especially great game against 31-0. A not especially great game for Drew against Northwestern, 18 for 33, 54.5%, 189 yards. Then the UMass game, and then the disaster against Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see, this is going to be the test for me to really see how much different of a guy Drew Aller is and how much different the coaching staff's trust in Drew Aller is. Because this is a game where Drew, if he is that guy, I'm not saying that it's like disappointing if he doesn't do this or anything like that. Again, a lot of context goes into this, but this is a game where Drew should be able to throw for 350, 400 plus yards, 4+ touchdowns, get those big plays in the passing game, build up that rapport, get guys like Liam Clifford and Julian Fleming and Caden Saunders going and show, like, I don't need to see a single thing out of Penn State's rushing attack in this game. I need to see a lot, Matt, out of Penn State's passing game.
Is there like a certain pass catcher? I wouldn't even limit it to just receivers, because is it 5 guys caught balls against West Virginia? Like it was Trey, Tyler Warren, Amari, Singleton, and Katron. I think it was just those 5. Is there anybody you want to see? Sorry?
I believe that was
Yeah,
it. I'm pulling it up now, but
is there anybody you want to see emerge here? Like, is it the Liam Clifford game? Is it the Caden Saunders? Is it Julian Fleming gets his first touchdown in the blue and white? Like, I'm going to go with Liam here. Yeah.
If I see Trey Wallace catch 8 balls for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns, I'm going to be over the goddamn moon. Like, okay. even if, I'd like to see Fleming get some targets. I'd like to see Saunders get some targets. I'd like to see, insert whoever you want here get some targets. Clifford get some targets. If Trey Wallace can show that he is a no doubt guy who, the Daniel Jeremiah line about what a wide receiver one is that everyone in the building knows you were throwing him the football and it does not matter. Mm-hmm. If everyone in the building knows that Drew Aller is trying to force feed the football to Trey Wallace and Trey is able to dominate this football game, that'll make me feel as good as anything else.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I get that line of thinking, but I think you need multiple guys for Aller to really reach his ceiling. So sure. I am watching the Liam Cliffords and the Julian Flemings of the world very tightly. Again, just because I'm looking for things that I think can pay off in the end. Not that I wouldn't think it'd be cool to see Tyseer Denmark, Anthony Ivy, Mekhi Flowers, Tyler Johnson get involved, but I don't think it's realistic to ask for them to be, 4 catch guys when October rolls around. I think Liam, Julian, Amari, Caden Saunders, I think Khalil Dinkins, if he's able to go, I know he practiced today. Those are guys I'm watching pretty closely to see if Drew spreads it out a little bit more. And then when Bo comes in, because I think Bo's going to throw a good bit in this one too. I'm excited to see who Bo goes to, because it feels like Bo almost always goes to his tight ends. I mean, I can only think of one time Bo's thrown the football to a wide receiver, and that's the Amari Evans touchdown in the Delaware blowout last year.
Yeah, and it certainly helps that while Bowling Green is not, again, they're not an elite defense or anything like that. They are a defense that has some talent. Again, Phil Steele in his preseason All-MAC. Cornerback Jordan Oladokin was a first-team selection. Safety C.J. Brown and defensive lineman Anthony Hawkins. Linebacker Joseph Sipp Jr. were all second-team selections. Trent Sims was a third-team selection. He is a safety. And it's interesting because Hawkins was the kind of guy that gave Penn State's offensive line trouble last year. And he's in that Johnny Newton mold where he's not a part, he's a big dude, physical dude, but he's quick and he is aggressive. Last week, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss against Fordham. Oladokin is a really good player. I think he is better than the cornerbacks that West Virginia threw it down, which is not a particularly high bar, but is still a bar to clear. Had 4 interceptions last year, and again, it's a first-team All-MAC selection. So there are guys that could potentially give Penn State some trouble in this football game, or are guys who can challenge Penn State players and are going to be a handful for Penn State's receivers. For Joseph Sipp Jr. at linebacker is going to be a really interesting chess match between him and Drew. Sipp is an undersized guy, but he really competes from the linebacker spot. And then, like you mentioned, Hawkins is a guy who, Nick Dawkins and Vega Ioane and Sal Wormley are going to have to deal with in the middle of that defense. So I think I think even though I say all of that, Matt, everything for me just comes back to wanting to see Penn State cook a little bit.
Yeah.
Wanting to see, and like, obviously that's something we want in every football game, right? We always want to see Penn State run it up on an opponent, but even beyond those games against the the FCS opponents, you look at what Drew's numbers were in the games that Penn State played last year where they had a major talent advantage. I'm just going off of yards per attempt. 7.8 yards per attempt in that game against Delaware, 6.3 in the game they played against Illinois, 5.7 in the game they played against Northwestern, 7 in that game they played against UMass, 6.8 in the game that they played against Indiana, which included a 57-yard touchdown pass in all of that, where he legitimately did throw the ball down the field in a way we didn't really see out of him. 7.1 yards per attempt against Maryland, and 6.1 yards per attempt against Rutgers before he ended up leaving the game with an injury. Obviously, that number got to be a little bit better against Michigan State when Mike Yurcich wasn't around, and they went up against an overmatched defense when he got to 11.2 yards per attempt. But like, these are the games where you expect to see your guy put up numbers, flex a little bit, show off what he can do. Like a really good example of this. Last week, Ole Miss played Furman. Ole Miss kicked the hell out of Furman 76-0. Their quarterback, Jackson Dart, who we saw firsthand is a really, really good football player.
Dude can play.
22 for 27, 418 yards, 15.5 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns. Bowling Green is better than Furman, Matt, but a game like this, you are afforded an opportunity to pad your stats a bit, to show off just how good of a football player you are. And like, I don't care about sportsmanship. I don't care about any of that. Like, I care about Penn State being the best team possible. This is the kind of game where it's right there for you to show that you are the best team possible, take advantage of it, and give yourself something to build on going forward once the schedule gets a little more teeth to it.
Yeah, and the offensive line I'm going to be watching here too a good bit. I think they're going to rotate a ton. Cooper Cousins, excited to see him. Javen Williams, whether that be at guard or at tackle. Nolan Rucci, I think, is going to play a ton. I want to see Alex Birchmeier. I think he was I liked him as a recruit, but again, we got to remember these guys are still just redshirt freshmen a lot of the time.
Right.
So I'm excited to see some new faces there, cultivate that depth, get some good reps in there. And I think you can get going early there, especially against a Bowling Green pass rush that, no disrespect, is not exactly, their strength. They're going to beat you through being gap sound and being in the right place at the right time. So definitely going to watch that space a good bit. And then special teams wise, who the kicker is. I am going to bring that up as often as I can, because I'm curious if it's going to be Barker, Sahadak, or Chase Meyer. Because I think it might be somebody different this week based upon Sahadak missing one last week.
See, I disagree a little bit, because I think this is a good chance for Sahadak to maybe get a little bit more of confidence, get some kicks in an environment that he knows, let himself see if you go in. He's probably going to have a lot of PATs in this one. Did he no, after he missed his field goal, Penn State didn't have an opportunity to send the offense back out there. Yeah, so send it back out there. Let's see what happens. And if he misses a field goal early on, then you go to one of the other guys in the kicking game. But I don't think this is it would be some crazy thing as Sahadak is the guy who gets the first lick. You don't throw away everything that happened in camp and all the stuff that made you believe in camp that this was the guy just because he misses one kick. But we'll see what happens there. And this actually leads pretty nicely, Matt, into we're going to ask a couple of questions to wrap this up. First one, who are the players on Penn State that you're watching the most closely as we get into Saturday afternoon?
For me, offensively, it's going to be, I don't want to cheat here, so I'll say Julian Fleming. He played pretty much every snap Trey played last week and didn't see a single target and not a single catch. And again, I don't think Fleming is going to be, wide receiver 3 or 4 is probably his ceiling, but I'm watching Julian Fleming pretty closely, especially if Liam Clifford is still a little bit banged up, which it sounds like he was, because they got to get somebody else involved. So it's Fleming for me offensively. Defensively for me, I've gone back and forth on this a good bit on who I really want to watch. But it's going to come back to Abdul Carter for me. I want to see how he settled in after game 1 and how he plays the run as an edge rusher. We all know the guy can get after the quarterback, but how is he going to be as a complete defensive end who has to get down the line and try to tackle a guy in between the tackles? And then miscellaneous guy for me that I'm watching. This is just a young guy who I think is going to get a good amount of run, and that's Elliott Washington. I think Bowling Green's going to have to throw a good bit late in the game. Elliott Washington had a great pick last week. I want to see what he does, to build off that.
Yeah, I want to say Drew on offense, obviously, but I'm actually going to go in a slightly different direction. And I'm, because in a passing game sense, I'm very interested to see if they use this game as an opportunity to really get Nick Singleton going as a pass catcher.
It's a great call.
Last week, he caught one ball for 13 yards. A lot of the talk out of camp was that Nick Singleton, we were going to see more and more of him in the passing game. And I want to see if they use this game as an opportunity to get him some relatively low stakes reps, get him a chance to, catch a couple of footballs against a defense where just nobody is going to be able to match his physical gifts. Cause if they want, they don't have to do that. This is one of those things they can keep slowly building towards, but it's something that I think that Bowling Green, bye week, Kent State, and then you get into Big Ten play. This is something that you could take, you can get an opportunity to gin up ways to get the ball into Nick's hands early and often and see what he does. Again, my real answer is Drew Aller, but Nick Singleton is a secondary guy I'm going to be watching here. And then on offense, and then on defense, like just any member of the linebacker court, whether that is Tony Rojas, whether that is Tyler Elsdon, whether that is Dom DeLuca, whether that is Kobe King, because I think that Bowling Green is pretty good in the trenches. Again, 3 starters were named preseason all MAC selections. Stewart is a very, very good running back, and they have that alternative option in, at quarterback in Anderson, who could take the ball and really move. So it's a group that I believe in, I think is really good. I believe the reports today out of practice were that Tamir Robinson did not practice.
He did not.
I wouldn't be shocked if we see a little bit more rotation there to keep a guy like Tony Rojas or a guy like Dom DeLuca or a guy like Kobe King fresh. And I want to see how they balance that with, all right, we want to make sure that we're keeping our guys in the field. We're not asking too much of our younger guys, our guys who aren't as physically developed or just starting their college football journey. And again, I'm not too terribly worried about this game, Matt. Vegas has Penn State as a 34.5-point favorite. Bill Connolly has Penn State winning by a score of 42-8, which is right on 34 points. Total in this game is 48.5. What do you think? FPI against Penn State is about a 97.6% chance of winning this game. What do you think about the spread? What do you think about the total? Where do you land in what I assume is going to be a Penn State win in your eyes?
Yeah, I'm going to call it out because if I can't call it out on my own podcast, no one will for me. I called the West Virginia game 34-17 Penn State. Final was 34-12. Very proud of that pick. I'm thinking on this one, I don't think Penn State covers, and I'm taking the under. And a big part of that is what I said at the top. Again, this is not so much a Penn State flaws thing. This is not so much a Bowling Green scares me thing. This is, again, focus. It's tough to focus in this. These are college kids, and it's going to be a nice weekend outside of the rain on Saturday in a warm weather environment, coming off an easy win with Kent State waiting on the other side of a bye week. So I have Penn State 38, Bowling Green 9. So they do not cover that spread. And I think it's kind of gross for part of it. Honestly, I just think that it's not going to be that 70-point firebombing that I think a lot of us would really be interested in seeing.
I do think Penn State is going to cover. A big reason for this is the one thing that everyone can basically praise James Franklin for is that he knows how to get his teams up to play in these sorts of games. The last time that they went out and they really slogged their way through a game at home against a non-conference opponent was that weird, gross game against Central Michigan in 2022 where they won 33-14. last year in these sorts of games really took care of business against Delaware, really took care of business against UMass. I think they're going to do the same thing here. The big thing for me is that if this game gets into Penn State just sells out to stop the run. I have no clue how Bowling Green is going to move the football on them, because I don't think they have a downfield passing game that is going to threaten Penn State in the slightest. I think I don't want to say they are just like West Virginia last week, but I think there are some similarities in that their most effective pass catcher might be their tight end. Their quarterback isn't someone who's going to really push the ball down the field a ton. They have a running game that Penn State should be able to overwhelm. And you put all of that together, and even if Penn State comes out a bit sluggish and they allow points on that first Bowling Green drive, I think that's going to lock them right, kick them right into gear. So I'm going to pick something, Penn State. Yeah, it doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong on this. Penn State 52, Bowling Green 6. I think this is one of those games where they come out and they really flex their muscles. And I hope that I'm right. I would strongly, and I know you were the same way. You would strongly prefer if it is closer to how I am correct than to how you are correct. But it's going to be a tough game going up against a team that was picked to finish third by coaches in the MAC this season. Again, a lot of guys who were considered some of the best players in the MAC. Should be a fun one.
Yeah.
Matt, any final things, whether it's pertaining to Penn State, whether it's pertaining to anything else in the world of college football you would like to talk about before we wrap up this edition of the pod?
Shout out Bill O'Brien, as always. Nice win.
Yeah, man.
That quarterback, Castellanos, can play, man. That's a drive to deep left, man. That guy can definitely play. No, it should be I'm excited for the Texas-Michigan game. I think that game's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I think Texas wins, but that Michigan defense, I think, will be interesting to watch, try to shut down a Texas team that is down running backs like you wouldn't believe. And that's like the big game that I think really intrigues me this week. Colorado, Nebraska. That's a big see where Matt Rule has that program in year 2. And then the NFL starts this week. I think today, when this comes out, Thursday, the Ravens play against the Chiefs. Hunter Norzad for the Chiefs. The Ravens have Adafe Owe, Adisa Isaac, and Jordan Stout. So should be cool watching Penn Staters on a Thursday. Excited about it.
Yeah, as Matt mentioned, shout out to Bill O'Brien, always and forever. 28-13 win over Florida State in Tallahassee. Really impressive performance by them, and watching O'Brien talk to Scott Van Pelt after the game, and he just has a huge smile on his face, and he's so complimentary of his team. Hit me right in the feel goods. That's a guy that I know I'm not alone in this. I'm always just rooting for the best for him. So we'll be rooting for BC throughout the season for however long Bill O'Brien stays there. Thank the good Lord he is not the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, because seeing him wear Ohio State gear would have killed me. Or seeing him wear Ohio State gear on a game day, I'm sure he did it a couple of times in the 2 weeks he was employed there, but neither here nor there. But yeah, I think that's it for this edition. The podcast, as always, thank you everyone for listening to Roar Lions Roar. Make sure you go and subscribe to us wherever you go and get your podcasts. If you use Apple Podcasts, please go leave us a 5-star review. If you use Spotify, leave us 5 stars over there. Head over to YouTube, subscribe to us over on YouTube, and hop into the comments, talk about whatever you want to talk about in the YouTube comments over there. Just be nice to everyone in the YouTube comments, because we should be nicer to each other, just as a general thing. Follow us on Twitter at RLRblog. And one last time, thank you very much to our sponsor, Home Field Apparel. If you've never purchased anything from Home Field before, use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this session of the pod. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Go State.